Is it okay if we move the extra chair away?
Yes, please do. I'd appreciate it if you did. Okay, gentlemen, we're going to pray in just a second. Please see. Are you ready to pray? Ready to pray?
Just a minute.
You'll have more time because they still have to come over.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I have alerted the judges and they are on their way. It's going to take a second or two because they're over there. introducing yourselves, but you're not shaking hands until at the end.
Should we introduce ourselves at the mic? Or just
Well, because you're Lincoln Douglas, you can just come up and say.
stand here?
Yeah, you go ahead.
At the mic?
Yeah, at
All
the
right,
mic will be better.
Okay.
This is called Hurry Up and Wait. They're here. Shh. Welcome, judges. We'll give you a few minutes to get your things together. Just look at me when you're ready. All right. Welcome to the 2024 Lincoln Douglas National Championship Final Round. I'd like to congratulate our affirmative speaker, Gabriel Zylstra. That's appropriate. Gabriel Zylstra. And our negative speaker, Josiah Unverzat. Will you please help me to congratulate them on the national finals debate? You guys are going to make me tear up. That was so sweet. Really excited that you're here, and we have 7 wonderful judges here this afternoon. And if you will allow me to introduce, in no particular order, we will begin with Dr. J.T. Turner. Mr. Turner holds a PhD from the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, a master's from Erskine College in Theology and Seminary, a Master of Arts from Liberty University, and a Bachelor of Science from Liberty University. He is currently an Associate Professor of Philosophy at Anderson University. He is husband to Bethany and father to James. He has enjoyed previously judging the Lincoln Douglas Finals here at Anderson in 2019. Please help me welcome Dr. Turner. Leah LeMaster Horton. Ms. Horton holds a Master's of Education from Covenant College. She's the founder of Horton Test Prep, and for the past 9 years, she has helped families earn full tuition and merit-based scholarships through high ACT, CLT, or SAT scores. She's both a test prep professional and scholarship expert. Leah absolutely loves helping families, like mine, navigate those potentially stressful college prep years. She's also an alumni NCFCA mom of 12 years and a past LD debate coach. Leah and her husband John got involved in speech and debate because they wanted their children to be able to look people in the eye and speak to anyone on any topic at any time. Please help me welcome Mrs. Horton. Marcy Taylor. Ms. Taylor holds a BS in music education. She's previously been a high school band director, private lesson flute instructor for over 30 years, homeschool mom for 19 years, and a small business owner for the past 2 years. She enjoys traveling with her husband of 30 years in his Jeep to drive over big rocks on the trail. It sounds very exciting. Reading, playing board games, and running. She won overall female in a 5K race last November. Marcy's been an NCFCA parent for 10 years. Please help me welcome Ms. Marcy Taylor. Christy Shipe. Christy holds a BA in political science from Cedarville University. She helped found this league in 1997 and has 25 plus years experience teaching and coaching debate. She's the author of the new, and I should say, and old, NCFCA Foundations of Policy Debate Curriculum, and author of the NCFCA Complete Guide to Value Debate. Christy has been married to her husband, Rich, for 26 years, and together they have 5 children, 2 sons-in-law, and 1 grandson. In her free time, she enjoys playing and teaching piano. Please give a warm welcome to Ms. Christy Shipe. Dr. Daniel Wiese. Dr. Wiese holds a PhD in philosophy and was the founding director of the Rutland Institute for Ethics at Clemson University. His research and writing focus is on issues in 3 areas: practical and professional ethics, legal philosophy, and social and political philosophy. Mr. Wiese has a special interest in what ethicists can learn from legal philosophers and vice versa. His work has appeared in various journals and textbooks. He has served as treasurer of the board of directors of the Association for Practical and Professional Ethics. He's been a member of the Society for Ethics across the curriculum since its inception and served 2 terms as its president. Will you give a warm welcome for Dr. Daniel Wiese? Mr. Ben McKay. Mr. McKay is currently completing his final year at Regent University for a BS in cybersecurity and a minor in computer science. He competed in NCFCA for 5 years, participating in Lincoln Douglas Value Debate, Moot Court, and several speech categories. Since graduating in 2020, he has served as an alumni judge and a debate coach for 4 years. He's the middle child of 5 siblings, all of whom have participated in NCFCA. He's also a musician, avidly involved in guitar, piano, and voice, and in his spare time, he is a huge musical theater enthusiast. Please welcome Mr. Ben McKay. Mrs. Barbara Hand. Mrs. Hand holds a Bachelor of Arts in Classical Studies from Vanderbilt, a Master of Arts in Classics from Ohio State University, and a Master of Education from Vanderbilt University. She has previously worked in process design, performance consulting, executive coaching, and organizational design. She and her family are currently transitioning to stewarding a farm that has been in her family for over 200 years. After many years of working in the corporate world and homeschooling. Sounds lovely. All 3 of her sons competed in Lincoln Douglas debate, and she has been an LD coach of several debaters who advanced to elimination rounds at the national championship over the years. Do please give a warm welcome for Ms. Barbara Hand. I am thrilled and excited to begin this round. Our competitors will introduce themselves to our illustrious judges. I will exit, and you, I'm sure, will enjoy the round. Congratulations.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Gabriel Zylstra, and I'll be your affirmative speaker today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
My name is Josiah Umberzat. I'll be your negative speaker. Again, thank you for all your time.
All right, if the panel of judges is all set. Alrighty. Pastor John MacArthur writes, quote, "The conscience has an innate ability to sense right and wrong. Everyone, even the most unspiritual heathen, has a conscience," end quote. For centuries, MacArthur's position was simply common knowledge, yet what people used to call the natural law, they now call a social construct. However, a team of researchers at Yale University investigated this very question. They showed infants a puppet, where essentially there was a puppet show where one puppet acted kindly and the other acted cruelly. The result they found was that overwhelmingly, infants favored the kind puppet. It's because we have innate knowledge about morality that I affirm the resolution, that rationalism should be valued above empiricism. You see, rationalism and empiricism are two different philosophical theories that attempt to explain how we know what we know, and whether or not we have a priori or innate knowledge. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, to be a rationalist is to affirm at least one of two main theses: the innate knowledge thesis or the innate concept thesis. Stanford explains, quote, "The innate knowledge thesis asserts that we have a priori knowledge, that is, knowledge independent for its justification of sense experience," end quote. Now, the innate concept thesis is similar. Quote, "According to the innate concept thesis, some of our concepts have not been gained from experience," end quote. So, in short, rationalism is the theory that people have some kind of innate knowledge, either factual knowledge, such as propositional knowledge, or conceptual knowledge, meaning our knowledge of concepts. However, empiricism rejects both of these theses, and instead claims, quote, "Insofar as we have knowledge, our knowledge is gained by our experiences. Experience is thus our only source of ideas," end quote. Now, to determine which of these theories is more valuable, the question we, of course, have to ask is which is true. Obviously, a false theory like flat Earth theory should never be valued above a true theory like round Earth theory. So consequently, I'd like to present truth as the value for this debate round. If Josiah can show that we do not have innate knowledge and that rather all knowledge stems from experience, that would show empiricism to be true. However, if I can show that we have innate knowledge or concepts, that would show rationalism to be true. So with that in mind, I'd like to get into my first contention. Contention 1, moral foundations are innately known. Moral foundations are innately known. According to empiricists such as John Locke, David Hume, and A.J. Ayer, people are born as blank slates who can only acquire knowledge through experience. However, more modern science has cast doubt on this theory. Research from anthropologist Donald Brown found that there are hundreds of beliefs, practices, and concepts that we can find all across the globe in every culture. And among these are many basic moral beliefs. So, for example, Brown finds that reciprocity and generosity are universally valued and admired. And every culture has some form of a concept of fairness. Now, obviously, different cultures disagree on exactly what counts as fair, but they all share the same basic foundations of their moral system, the ideas of right and wrong, vice and virtue. And while these principles don't give us a perfect or infallible knowledge of morality, what they do is they form the foundation of our understanding. According to the work of psychologist Jonathan Haidt, there are several foundational values that form the basis for moral beliefs across the world, including things like loyalty, liberty, and care for others. But all of this simply goes to show that, ironically enough, the empirical evidence actually refutes empiricism. by showing us that people with completely different experiences share the same innate knowledge and concepts about morality. Contention 2, experience alone can't provide moral knowledge. Experience alone can't provide moral knowledge. You see, while our experiences undeniably give us a lot of important knowledge, empiricism goes a step further, claiming that experience is the source of all knowledge. This becomes a problem when we consider something that can't be seen, touched, or smelled, like the concept of right and wrong. Morality can't be empirically observed because it transcends the physical world. Imagine, for example, you witness a burglary. Your senses can give you important information such as what direction the burglar went, how much money he stole, and what he was wearing. But what they can't tell you is that burglary is unethical. Even empiricists like David Hume agree to this basic distinction, that observing what is does not tell you what ought to be. However, since empiricists rely solely on experience, and experience cannot give us moral knowledge, they are necessarily left with some form of moral relativism, that being the belief that there are no objective moral facts. Without innate knowledge, experience alone can't distinguish the moral from the immoral. And this is why David Hume himself was eventually led to the conclusion that there is no such thing as moral knowledge in the first place, because it's a logical consequence of the empiricist worldview. If all of our knowledge comes from experience, and experience cannot give us moral knowledge, it would logically follow that we cannot have moral knowledge. However, it's because morality is in fact not relative, and because we have innate knowledge of morality that I once again affirm the resolution. Thank you so much, and I'm now ready for cross-examination.
I have 3 minutes on the clock for cross-examination. Ready?
Yep.
Perfect. I'll begin now. Gabriel, that was a great speech. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Obviously, I have just a few questions. First, can we agree this debate is held in the realm of epistemology?
Absolutely.
That's commonly defined as looking at the nature, sources, and limits of knowledge.
Yes, especially the sources of knowledge.
Of course. Can we agree knowledge is a justified true belief?
Yes, those are all necessary components of knowledge.
Sure. And can we be aware of knowledge or concepts outside of experience?
So the issue of rationalism versus empiricism is the justification component of knowledge.
Sure.
Yes.
Can we agree justification is the act of showing something to be true?
It's not the act of showing something to be true necessarily. Justification more has to do with what is the source of knowledge, what proves the knowledge to be true, in other words.
Can we agree that justification is showing something to be true, whether that's an action or not?
It's something that shows something to be true. It's not the process of showing something to be true, if that makes sense.
Interesting. So can we show something to be true without experiencing that thing?
Yes.
How so?
Because we have innate knowledge.
How do we know we have innate knowledge?
Because we know it. That's the point of innate knowledge. It doesn't derive from experience. We don't need to experience something in order to know that we know it. Rather, it's self-evident.
Sure, so it's self-evident. But how are we aware of innate knowledge?
Because it's a part of our rational nature.
And the example you brought up was morality in the baby study, correct?
Yes.
Is there another example of knowledge which is innate besides morality?
There are other examples, however, my case primarily focuses on that.
Right.
If I can show that there's one example of innate knowledge, that shows that rationalism is true.
Sure. Can we have morality apart from God?
Can we have morality or knowledge about morality?
Either.
No, we can't have anything apart from God.
Of course. Can we prove that God exists?
Yes.
How so?
Various different means.
If we can prove that God exists, then why do many people deny that he does so?
Because not everybody believes that, not everybody's observed the evidence, and some people deny what they know to be true.
So is it your contention that we can prove that God exists through reason and experience, and not that we believe in him through faith?
I'm not really talking about the existence of God. I'm talking about our innate moral knowledge.
Sure. Can we provide a logical justification for how God exists?
Yes.
How so?
Well, there are various different arguments, such as the ontological argument or the idea of inferring a first cause, but I'm not sure how this pertains to this debate.
Sure. Could you provide a logical syllogism for how we know that God exists?
No, because that's not the argument I've prepared for. The argument I'm making is that we have innate moral knowledge.
Again, but this moral knowledge is dependent upon the existence of God, correct? Without God, we have no concepts of morality.
You don't need to believe that God exists in order to believe that there are certain moral facts. Now, I agree that ultimately morality derives from God, but certainly many atheists do believe in moral facts and acknowledge those moral facts.
So can one logically be an atheist and claim that morality exists?
I don't think you can be a logically consistent atheist, but you can be an atheist who believes in morality.
Thank you. No time remaining. I have 3 minutes of prep time. All right, 7 minutes. Quote, "A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts. So he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions." It is because I agree with the somewhat humorous words of Alan Watts, a 20th century writer and philosopher, that I negate today's resolution. Rationalism should not be valued above empiricism. Before I continue, I'd like to clarify a few key definitions. The first is that of empiricism. Now, the American Psychological Association defines empiricism as, quote, "an approach to epistemology, holding that all knowledge of matters of fact either arises from experience or requires experience for its validation." And again, this point of validation or justification is a large point in today's debate. Now, empiricism relies on a posteriori knowledge, which according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary is, quote, "knowledge relating to or derived by reasoning from observed facts," end quote. Note that reason is still used, but it's dependent upon observable information. This brings me to my value. The value that I propose is that of knowledge. Since the time of Plato, knowledge has been defined using a concept known as the tripartite analysis of knowledge. This concept defines it as, quote, "a justified true belief." Simply put, knowledge must meet 3 criteria. It must be true, it must be justified, and it must be a belief. Now, my opponent has brought up a value of truth. However, truth exists outside of the human mind and is a transcendent spiritual reality. There are many truths which exist, but which humankind will never have any knowledge of. Therefore, I propose we limit our value down to knowable truth, namely knowledge. You can tag my 1 point of resolutional analysis as implied value. To quote the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, quote, "the dispute between rationalism and empiricism takes place primarily within epistemology, the branch of philosophy devoted to studying the nature, sources, and limits of knowledge." Again, because we are arguing in the realm of epistemology, we're both trying to achieve knowledge. With that established, my argument is simple. Rationalism ought not to be valued over empiricism, because knowledge can only be discovered and validated through experience. This can be further explained through 2 supporting contentions. Contention 1, knowledge is acquired through empiricism. Again, knowledge is acquired through empiricism. In the words of early modern philosopher Immanuel Kant, quote, "that all our knowledge begins with experience, there can be no doubt. For how should the faculty of knowledge be called into activity, if not by objects which affect our senses and convert the raw material of our sensible impressions into knowledge of objects, which we call experience? With respect to time, therefore, no knowledge within us is antecedent to experience, but all knowledge begins with it." Now, interestingly, Kant is considered to have been a rationalist. Despite this, he concedes that true knowledge can only originate in the senses. Humans are incapable of forming knowledge outside of experience. Scottish Enlightenment philosopher David Hume describes this in his book, An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding. Quote, "If it happen, from defect of an organ, that a man is not susceptible to any species of sensation, we always find he is as little susceptible of the correspondent ideas. A blind man can form no notion of colors, nor a deaf man of sounds. Restore either of them that sense in which he is deficient, and by opening this new inlet for his sensations, you also open an inlet for the ideas. And he finds no difficulty in conceiving these objects." This leads me to my second contention, contention 2. Knowledge is not acquired through rationalism. Again, knowledge is not acquired through rationalism. Looking back to our definitions, we see that rationalism is dependent upon innate knowledge, or innate ideas. Now, we can agree that knowledge is defined as a justified true belief, and justification is how we show something to be true. Again, it's the action of showing something to be true. Now, no action can be done innately. Again, innate is commonly held to mean before we are born. No action can be done before we are born. Therefore, no justification of our knowledge can be done before we are born. Therefore, we do not have innate justified true beliefs. Therefore, we do not have innate knowledge. And this is in response to my opponent's first point on innate knowledge. You can tag my second argument as innate instinct does not equal knowledge. Again, innate instinct does not equal knowledge. My opponent brought up a study of babies which showed certain moral instincts. However, these babies cannot justify why they felt this way. They do not have justified true beliefs. Now, instincts are defined by Merriam-Webster Dictionary as, quote, behavior that is mediated by reactions below the conscious level. These babies do not consciously know why something is good or wrong, only that they have certain instincts toward good and wrong. That being said, I'd like to respond to a few more of my opponent's points. His first being that moral foundations are innately known. Again, moral foundations are innately known. Again, my main argument against this point is the word known. These are not known because they are not justified. We have to justify something in order for it to be knowledge, and nothing can be innately justified. His second contention was that experience alone cannot provide moral knowledge. However, I contend that morality is known through authority. We can have no moral knowledge apart from God. Again, my opponent said that an atheist cannot logically say that we have morality because morality is dependent upon God, and I agree to this. However, we know God through faith. One cannot provide a logical justification as to why he exists. As Christians, we know that God exists through faith. As an empiricist, I'm not asked to argue against my Christian worldview. I'm not saying we don't have morality. I'm simply saying that morality is not innately justified. Therefore, it's not an example of innate knowledge. Now, my opponent brought up this example of a study in which babies were shown to either value something that was good or value something less that was bad. I'd like to refer back to this study. This is a quote by the University of Otago. Quote, "We conducted a series of experiments in which, as in the Yale study, 10-month-old infants watched puppet shows. In the puppet shows, infants watched a wooden toy attempt to climb a hill. They viewed two social interactions, one in which a helper toy nudged the climber up the hill, the other in which a hinderer toy nudged the climber down the hill. After viewing these two scenarios, infants were presented with a tray. On one side of the tray was the helper, and on the other side was the hinderer. Now, many of the infants picked the helper over the hinderer, but only if they had seen the climber bounce up and down at the top of the hill in the helper scenario. In stark contrast, of the infants who watched the climber bounce up and down at the bottom of the hill in the hinderer scenario, the majority picked the hinderer over the helper." End quote. What this goes to show is that the infants were attracted to things that showed more motion, not necessarily the puppets that displayed good or bad intentions. Therefore, we can see that our knowledge of morality does come through experience. Sure, the law of God may be written on our hearts, but that doesn't mean it's in our minds. This doesn't mean it's innate, justified true beliefs. Again, if my opponent can prove that we have innate, justified true beliefs, then sure, innate knowledge exists. But justification is an act of showing something to be true. And this can only be done through experience. Because experience gives us awareness, and because it gives us justification, I continue to negate the resolution. Again, rationalism should not be valued over empiricism. That being said, I'm now open to any questions Gabriel may have.
Do you mind if I set this here?
Sure.
Thank you. Yep. All right, 3 minutes on the clock?
Okay.
All right, and if our panel's all ready? Alrighty. Well, first of all, Josiah, congratulations on making it to finals.
Thank you, you too.
Now, as usual, I have a couple of questions. First of all, could you restate the first point that you brought up under your second contention?
Sure. That of justified true belief, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Sure. Knowledge is defined as a justified true belief. Justification is the act of showing something to be true. No action can be done innately, therefore we do not have innate justified true beliefs.
Okay, but can we agree that the issue we're talking about is not the process of justification, but the source of justification, the source of knowledge as you described in cross-examination?
But knowledge is only knowledge when it is a justified true belief. Therefore, concepts are not justified, therefore it's not really knowledge.
Okay. Now you also talked about how you can't go against your Christian beliefs. Just to be clear, you are denying that we have innate moral knowledge, right?
I'm denying that we can justify our moral understandings innately. Sure, I agree that God has given us moral concepts, but not that we can justify those before we are born.
So we do have innate moral concepts.
That would depend on how you define concepts.
How do you define concepts?
I believe I have a definition back there. I could define it later.
Okay, yeah, we can move on.
Sure.
Now you also talked about the idea of how our moral knowledge is not justified because justification is not something that can happen before we have experience, right?
Correct.
What was your evidence for that?
Essentially logical syllogisms. If justification is an action, and if no actions can be done innately, then therefore we do not have innate justified true beliefs.
Okay, and then what was the second point under your second contention?
I believe I responded to your evidence on the Yale study with babies.
Okay, and did you respond to the other two main studies that I brought up under my first contention?
I do not have time to respond to every point you brought up, no.
Okay. And then moving on to the issue of the value, you brought up the value of knowledge. Are you saying that empiricism and rationalism acquire knowledge?
Sure. These theories are essentially in conflict on where
So
the
they
source
are-
of our knowledge is found. Is the
Sure.
source found in experience or innate knowledge?
But can we agree that whether a theory is valuable depends entirely on whether or not it's true?
Sure, but the point of these theories is on how we acquire
Sure.
knowledge, which is why knowledge is what we're trying to get to.
But if empiricism is a false theory, we should not value it, correct?
Sure.
Okay. So the ultimate question that we have to answer in this debate round is rationalism true or is empiricism true?
Again, but the reason we're having this debate is so that we can achieve a foundation for knowledge, or the source of knowledge, excuse me.
Right. But these are theories, they're descriptions of a reality, they're not methods of achieving knowledge in and of themselves.
No, but the theories are theories on methods of achieving knowledge.
Okay. You also talked about how morality, actually it looks like I'm very low on time, but thank you so much for your answers. And then right after this, I'll be taking some prep time starting at 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Josiah? Yep. No further prep time is necessary. I have 1 minute and 42 seconds remaining. Let me just write that down real quick. All right, Josiah, 4 minutes. And then if you guys are all set as well. Alrighty. Well, before I get into the issues of disagreement, I'd like to establish one main point of agreement. Now, we have seemingly disagreed on the value, but I don't think there's really much of a conflict here in actuality. We agreed in cross-examination that the core issue of this debate is whether or not rationalism or empiricism are true. So whether or not you operate under the value of knowledge or the value of truth, we should value the true theory above the false theory. And whether or not a theory is true in this situation depends on whether or not we have innate knowledge or innate concepts. So with that in mind, I'd like to show that innate moral knowledge exists throughout this speech. Now, Josiah talked about how he brought up a quote from Hume basically saying that blind people cannot understand the idea of color, and this was under his first contention. And my response to this is that this applies to physical knowledge, not metaphysical knowledge. Physical knowledge, not metaphysical knowledge. I understand to understand something like the color red. That's something that's physical, and obviously we need physical sensory experience in order to understand it. However, the issue is that morality transcends the physical world. You cannot observe a moral principle, and so therefore you cannot understand what morality is if you only rely on your sense experience. Now, next he talked under his second contention about how knowledge is not acquired through rationalism. Now, just to clarify, I think what he means here is that it's not acquired through reasoning, because as we agreed, these are theories and not methods of acquiring knowledge. So I'd just like to address this. First of all, he brought up a syllogism. Essentially, he said that because you can't justify something before you're born, that means that you can't have knowledge before you're born. However, I think he's misunderstanding the issue in this debate round. The issue in this debate round is not what triggers our understanding of knowledge, or rather what gives us our ideas of knowledge. The question is, what is the source of knowledge? I'd just like to read a piece of evidence from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It says, quote, "Our innate knowledge is not learned through either experience or deduction. It's just a part of our nature. Experiences may trigger a process by which we bring this knowledge to consciousness, but these experiences do not provide us with the knowledge itself. It has been in some way with us all along," end quote. In other words, to have innate knowledge, you do not need to have gone through a conscious process of logically justifying it or justifying it through experience. Rather, it's simply something that's part of your nature. Now, what I'm claiming in this debate round is not that we have knowledge that is something that's where we've logically justified it or gone through the process of justification before our experience. Rather, I'm arguing that the source of justification occurs before experience. That is, our rational nature. Next, he talked about how it's an instinct, not knowledge. And my response is that it's intellectually grasped. It's intellectually grasped. The conscience is fundamentally different from an instinct. When your doctor hits your knee and your foot shoots out, that's an instinct. You don't need to intellectually grasp it or consciously consider it. However, our understanding of morality requires not only actions and instincts, but reflection upon our actions. But then my second response is that it's unique to humans. If our conscience were really something that's simply not part of our rational nature, but rather merely an instinct, we would expect it to be present in other animals, but it's not. Only humans have this unique capacity for this innate knowledge. And so because of it, we can see that it's a part of our rational human nature, not merely an instinct. Now, he talked about how it's derived from authority. Basically, we derive our moral knowledge from God. And I agree. But my first response is that innate knowledge is divine revelation. Innate knowledge is divine revelation. Historically, rationalists haven't separated the two, as according to the Stanford Encyclopedia, quote, "According to some rationalists, we gained knowledge in an earlier existence. According to others, God provided us with it at creation," end quote. It's for all of these reasons I once again affirm the resolution. Thank you.
minutes. Ready? Perfect. Okay, now. In my final negative speech, I would like to identify where the main conflict in this debate round lies, and then I'd like to identify 3 main voting issues in this round. First, my opponent has claimed that we essentially agree upon the value. And sure, I can agree to this to a certain extent. Both rationalism and empiricism are theories on the source of knowledge. Knowledge is valued highest in this round. One theory is true, the other theory is false. Therefore, whichever theory is true should be the one that values knowledge the highest, and we should hold it to be valued highest in this round. Now, these 2 theories depend upon innate knowledge. My opponent brought this up in his first speech. Rationalism will tell you that we have innate knowledge, innate, justified, true beliefs that are with us before we are born. Empiricism will tell us that we do not, that all justification comes through experience. Again, I brought this up in my first definition. That being said, I'd like to respond to his first point in response to my first contention, which he tagged as physical knowledge, not metaphysical knowledge. You can tag my response as metaphysical knowledge relies upon experience. Again, metaphysical knowledge relies upon experience. Again, knowledge is a justified true belief. In order to believe something, we must be aware of that thing. However, we cannot be aware of something without first experiencing it. My opponent has brought up no examples of knowledge that we are aware of without first experiencing it. He did bring up morality, and I will respond to this later on. Tag my next argument as justification. Now, my opponent has said that we're arguing about the source of knowledge. Therefore, it doesn't have to be a justified true belief. He stated that our rational nature is the source of our knowledge, and we have an innate rational nature. However, I do not agree that this is what this debate is about. Again, a rational nature basically means the ability to reason. Therefore, his argument is that we have an innate ability to reason. And I agree to this. Sure, we have an innate ability to reason. It's something we are born with. We also have an innate ability to experience. As humans, it's something that we're all born with. But this debate isn't about innate rational nature. This debate comes down to innate knowledge. Rationalism is a theory that we have innate knowledge, not that we have innate rational nature, rather that we have innate knowledge. Therefore, sure, rational nature may be a source, just as experience can be a source. In order to know something, our senses and experience work hand in hand. But I'd like to refer back to the definition of a posteriori knowledge, which I brought up in my first speech. Again, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, a priori knowledge is, quote, knowledge related to or derived by reasoning from observed facts. Therefore, as the empiricist in this round, I can affirm that we have a rational nature. But that rational nature, that reasoning, is dependent upon observed facts. As an empiricist, I'm denying that we have innate knowledge, not that we have an innate rational nature. Again, the empiricist can use their reason. That reason just must be based upon experience. That being said, I'd like to respond to his point that moral instincts are innate to humans. You can tag my response to this as faith and authority. Again, what this debate comes down to is, do we have innate, justified true beliefs of morality, or is that morality learned through faith and authority? Again, the point I brought up in my last speech was that we cannot logically have morality without God. One cannot innately prove that God exists. Therefore, our knowledge of God is dependent upon faith. Therefore, our knowledge of morality is also dependent upon faith. Again, without asserting that God exists, we cannot logically assert that morality exists. Because we know God through faith, that would also imply that we know morality through faith. Again, if we look at how we actually gain our knowledge of morality, it's through the Bible, the Holy Spirit, etc. As a Christian, I cannot say we don't have these things. I'm simply saying that we don't have innate, justified true beliefs of these things. Again, babies, when they're born, they cannot justify why they think some things are good or why these things are bad. I even brought up a piece of evidence showing that these babies didn't even necessarily lean towards the good or bad things. They simply chose the ones which showed the most motion. And my opponent did not respond to this example. That being said, you can tag my first voting issue as justification, and I'll present 3 voting issues. Again, justification. Knowledge is a justified true belief, and this debate comes down to, do we have innate knowledge or not? In my opponent's next speech, he may bring up the innate concept thesis, which would state that rationalism is also dependent upon innate concepts. However, let's look at the definition of concept. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines concept as something conceived in the mind. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines conceived as to cause or to begin. Therefore, by claiming that we have innate concepts, my opponent is claiming that we have some things that begin in the mind, namely our rational nature. Again, I agree to this. We have a posteriori knowledge, and our rational nature is something we are born with. Therefore, sure, we may have an innate concept, but that's not what this debate is about. That's not where the conflict is found. My opponent stated in his first speech that this debate comes down to whether we have innate knowledge or not. Again, if a concept is just the ability to reason, then no, I don't have to disprove that we have an innate ability to reason, only that we have innate justified true beliefs. My second voting issue, you can tag as awareness. Again, awareness. Gabriel's not brought up any examples of knowledge that we can be aware of without experience. Even our knowledge of morality must depend upon experience. Again, whether something is good or bad would depend upon that said thing. It's not morally wrong to kill a fly, but it is morally wrong to kill a human. These things are dependent upon experience, and they're dependent upon awareness. Nothing is knowledge until we are aware of it. Again, knowledge is justified true belief, therefore we must be aware of it. My third and final voting issue is faith and authority. Again, morality comes through faith and authority, not necessarily through reason. And all I am saying is that it is not a justified true belief. For these three reasons, we can see that rationalism cannot be logically upheld. Again, rationalism is dependent upon a priori knowledge or innate knowledge. Knowledge that is true, knowledge that we know of before we are born. However, we must be aware of knowledge, and we must justify knowledge in order for it to even be knowledge. Therefore, we must have innate, justified true beliefs, which, as we can see, cannot be upheld. Therefore, the source of our knowledge, which is the conflict, is found in our experiences. Thank you. It's been a pleasure speaking.
All right, I'll be taking prep time in just a sec with 1 minute and 42 seconds on the clock, as soon as I can get it up here. All right, 1 minute, 42 seconds. All right, 3 minutes. And then if you guys are all set as well. Alrighty. Well, in this speech, I'd like to prove three main things. First of all, we do have moral knowledge. Secondly, moral knowledge cannot be derived purely from experience. And thirdly, empiricism relies purely on experience. So first of all, we do have moral knowledge. I presented evidence for this in my first speech, specifically that this is innate moral knowledge. And while Josiah responded to the example I brought up in my introduction, he did not respond to the actual two pieces of evidence that I brought up in my first contention. And so he hasn't really refuted the point that I brought up. Essentially what we see is that people from across the world with totally different experiences share the same basic knowledge about morality. Now, I agree with Josiah that people don't exactly agree on what is moral and what's not moral. And indeed, to know the difference between a fly and a human, for example, we do need some knowledge about the real physical world. But you can tag my response as principle versus application. I'm not arguing that we exactly know how to apply moral principles before birth. Rather, I'm arguing that we innately understand moral principles, such as fairness, justice, love, kindness, things of that sort, not necessarily exactly how to apply them. No, so that's my first voting issue, that innate moral knowledge exists, and he hasn't really refuted the evidence I brought up for that. But then my second voting issue is that empiricism excludes moral knowledge. Empiricism excludes moral knowledge. Essentially, we seem to both agree that empiricism claims that all knowledge must be derived from experience. Josiah brought up things such as faith and authority. However, this would still be excluded by empiricism, because empiricism says all knowledge is derived from experience. That's something that both of our definitions agree upon. Now, additionally, he talked about how we can't be aware of knowledge without experience. However, justification innately is not a process. I'm not arguing that we rationally go through a process before birth. Obviously, we cannot think logically before birth, but he's confusing rationality or the process of reasoning with our rational nature. Those are two very different things. Something that's innately justified is not justified through a process at all, rather it's justified a priori, before we have gone through any sort of process. Now, he also talked about how we can't know morals without knowing God. I think this was largely unsubstantiated. I agree that ontologically, morality depends on God. I don't think that it does in epistemology, though. He also talked about how we need awareness. However, I don't think awareness is necessary within this debate round. We're not talking about where our awareness of knowledge comes from. We're talking about the justification. I brought up a piece of evidence about that earlier. Experience may trigger awareness of knowledge. That doesn't mean that it justifies the knowledge. And then my final voting issue is substantiation. I think I brought up substantial evidence to show we have innate moral knowledge, and because of that, rationalism is true. It's because empiricism excludes the possibility of moral knowledge that I affirm the resolution. Thank you so much. It's been a fantastic round.